Hey, what's up everyone, and welcome to your guide on how to play the Leningrad Dutch against the move pawn to d4. So it comes after we play f5, and this is already a pretty uncommon move. It only occurs in 2% of chess.com games, and straight off the bat, we are playing to control the e4 square as much as possible to try and prevent white from ever pushing up to e4. So the main setup that we're going for as black is knight to f6, just locking down control really well, and then g6, then bishop to g7, and then castling. So here, we have a very good bishop that will open up eventually and have a major presence on the game, and our knight and pawn work very well controlling the e4 square. So once our opponent tries to get the light squared bishop out, we will play the move d6. And this is a very important and key move because we now work to push e5. And this is a very critical pawn break in this position because we now will have a major presence in the center once we get it on the board. So if they decide to play like bishop to d3, we can now push up to c6. And this move prevents the knight from coming into b5 or d5. And this move will become very clear why we play in a minute, because after they castle, we can now play the move queen to e6. Because before going back here, if we didn't play c7 and we just played queen e8, they can now play the move knight to b5, and this is just kind of annoying because now they're just threatening a fork, and we're forced to respond here, so that's kind of annoying. So instead, I think playing c6 first is much better, and now we go for queen to e8. So if they just more developing moves, we now play knight to d7, and here we can now successfully get the push in. And white has to be extremely careful here, because if they just play, a normal developing move like queen to c2, we can now push up to e5. And once they capture back, the bishop is now hit and it's forced to drop back. And now we will get this fork on the bishop and the knight. So they were essentially forced into this position because our central presence was so strong. And now either piece will have to move and we can take, and we're just up 2 points of material here. So we are absolutely crushing there. And going back here, if white tries to push up in the center with a move like pawn to e4, this is also really bad because depending on the situation, we can end up winning this bishop. So here, if they capture back, they'll take back with a knight, and now we can capture back here. Most of the times, they'll actually do this when they have their rook here. So now they will probably push because it's much stronger now. But anyways, we will take back. And here, they have to pretty much take back with the bishop, because if they don't, we can now take the knight like this, and this bishop is a goner pretty much, because now our rook sees this bishop as it opens up, because this knight and pawn are now out of the way. That's one of the big time advantages for having a pretty active rook from this opening. So anyways, if they take back with the bishop, now we just win this bishop, and once again we're up 3 points of material. If they capture with the rook, this looks like it holds, but it doesn't, because we can just push up to d5. They'll take back. The rook is now hit and forced to go back, and now we can capture the bishop. So that right there is another, pretty early trick that you can use in the Dutch. If they capture back with the bishop, well, we can always take back, and now they can capture back with the rook. And, because we don't have a pawn to d5 push now, because the knight actually defends. And if they're smart, they'll capture back with the bishop, but I've had that trap work many times, so do not bank on them taking back with the bishop, because a lot of times they will take back with the knight. Okay, so going back here, that is the main setup pretty much we're looking for, where we have, d6, and we can also try and fianchetto our bishop, but there also is some other traps we have and other tricky lines that we have to know to do when we face. So anyways, heading back here, if we go back to pretty much the same position, this is all of white's most common moves too, so you may not see these moves in the exact order, but there's a very large chance that you will see them eventually. But anyways, if we go back here, and if they actually play the move bishop to g5, we have a potential trap here, because after the move knight to e4, we are now hitting absolutely everything. So if they capture back with a knight, which they do most of the time, we can now capture back with the pawn, and now the knight is hit. If the knight comes to e5, which white does do a good amount of the time, we can now push up to d6, and now the knight is trapped. The knight cannot go anywhere because our bishop opens up and sees this square, and our pawn covers both of these squares, so the bishop is trapped. If they try and go back to like d2 or something, we can now take this pawn. White will now take this pawn, and now we can capture this b pawn, and the rook will drop over, and now we can drop back, and here we're just up a pawn, so that's once again another nice trap that we have in the Dutch. This is a very tricky opening. I mean, there's loads of traps, as you see, and also one more line I want to go over in this main line that is kind of tricky to deal with. It actually doesn't come when white plays the move pawn to c4. Instead, if they just go for a little bit of a different approach, if they play like, you know, here, we can push, and if they try to get like their bishop out early and get active this way, and play a move like bishop to like c4, we can now just play the move e6. And this just cuts off the bishop, because here, you know, we can't castle, and sometimes they will also play bishop to c4 when we're already castled, which results in a check, but we will just play the move e6 in both cases. And this isn't quite the position we want, of course, because, you know, we want to get to e5, but this is still a perfectly fine position, because we can now go into sort of like a Stonewall Dutch-like position with a push like up to d5. You know, we can get our bishop out, knight out. We could probably also fianchetto our bishop too if we want, but this is like pretty similar to a Stonewall Dutch as far as I know, with this sort of pawn structure that we have. So sometimes bishop to c4 can be pretty aggressive as white, but it's pretty easy to neutralize as black. And now I'll get into some of the tricky lines that white can offer. The first one is the Staunton Gambit, which comes after e4, and here we'll just take back. And this is quite tricky. There's a good amount of traps here. I mean, white will just play the move knight to c3. We can just play knight to f6 back. Bishop to g5 is the most common move. And now we can just play knight to c6. And they'll end up winning back this pawn, most likely, you know, if they take back. But it's fine. You know, it's worth giving up the pawn to avoid, like, some of the tricky traps and stuff. So, I mean, this really isn't, like, too hard to deal with. If they try and push, we can just go here. And, I mean, once again, this isn't that hard to neutralize. If they try and give like a queen check like right here, that doesn't work, because now we can just play g6, and it might look like they have this queen to e5 move, you know, attacking the pawn and hitting a rook in the corner. That looks kind of scary, but it's absolutely nothing, because we can just play knight to f6. That shields the rook from being attacked, and it defends this pawn in the process. So queen to h5 is not an option for white. So that's kind of the Staunton Gambit. Not too much to look in there, but definitely something you want to know to do against. Okay, so the last tricky variation that I'd like to cover is the Hopton attack, and it comes after bishop to g5. So this is an annoying variation to face, because now we can't play the move knight to f6. If we do, white can just trade, and now our knight is gone. We don't really have much tension on the e4 square. If we try and fianchetto, that won't work because we're blocked by our own pawn. So that doesn't work. So that's pretty annoying whenever they go for this variation, but instead, we'll just play aggressive right back at them with the move h6. Now the bishop is forced back to h4. We will now play pawn to g5. Bishop will drop back, and here in this position, make sure you never even play the move f4, because if you do, you will look like a total idiot, because now they can play e3, sacrificing their bishop, and if you haven't spotted it already, if we take, they have checkmate in 1 with queen to h5, and because their king is so weak on this diagonal, we have no other pieces that can defend it, so that is just an easy checkmate. White just won in a couple moves, so don't get greedy and go for f4. If we ignore it, we just lose a pawn for absolutely zero compensation, so just do not play f4. That is just not a good move. Don't get greedy. Instead, just play knight to f6. Now, if they play like knight to c3, now we can play f4, because this sacrifice does not work now, because this square is now covered. If they try and check, this is not checkmate anymore, because our knight is now developed and out and covering. So if they play like knight to c3, now we can play f4. So, I mean, they'll likely just play, e3, and here we can just continue with bishop to g7. If you want, you can, of course, castle. I don't know if I would highly recommend it, because, I mean, you are kind of castling into chaos. They can always play h4, and, I mean, you're fine here, but, I mean, this is pretty overextended. So, instead, you can always just try and, maybe go queenside castling. Like, you can go d6. You can go for a same pawn break, too. That's a good option. You can also try and go for a queen trade and maybe just try and avoid castling here. If not, I mean, after a move like h4, you just push up, just knight to e2. We can just develop, we can get our knight out if we want. I mean, we can get our bishop out, we can push. Engine likes knight to h4 also, but anyways, the Hopton attack, just know that it's not really fun to go. It's not too great. It will just lead into a lot of tricky positions for both colors, so it's just not the greatest variation to go against, but you're still doing fine for sure. Just main thing, just make sure you never go into that f4 line, because of course you will end up blundering mate in 1 or a pawn. So I think that's just about all the lines that I need to cover for you to start playing the Leningrad Dutch. It is an awesome opening. It's excellent. It can throw white off when they play d4. And it also excludes all the London, Queen's Gambit, and Catalan theory, so that is another bonus for you. So I thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you all next time. Have a great day.